7 weeks into the standoff on Doklam, and India and China now appear to be finally talking at the tactical level, but not about Doklam. Sources say there was a flag meeting at Chushul in southeast Ladakh between senior Indian and Chinese military officers. The meeting was at the level of brigadier. Sources say the meeting was about Tuesday's incident on the Pangong Tso Lake just north of Chushul. In fact, sources say the meeting was pre-scheduled, but it appears that the main item on the agenda was the Chinese incursion into the Indian side of the Pangong Tso Lake. Both sides, sources say, have committed to maintaining peace and tranquility. Reports say Chinese troops entered the Indian bank of the lake, claiming it as their own. The sources say they were armed with iron rods. Both sides threw stones at each other before the Chinese withdrew. And importantly, this is the first incident of its kind between the two sides. The Chinese Foreign Ministry expressed ignorance of the incident.
你说的具体情况我不了解，但是我可以告诉你的是，中国的边防部队一直在致力于维护中印边境地区的和平与安宁，而且呢，我们一直在实控线中方一侧巡逻和执行。我们敦促印方恪守两国间达成的有关协议、协定和规定，切实地遵守1959年实控线，切实地维护两国边境地区的和平与稳定。
But it may have added a disturbing new element to the 2-month-long standoff on the Doklam Plateau in Bhutan in the east, where around 300 Indian and Chinese troops are camped within a few hundred meters of each other. China claims the territory as its own. India says the territory is disputed between Bhutan and China, and it has come to Bhutan's aid at its request. All right, Einar Tanjin joins me live from Beijing. He's a political and economical commentator on economics and politics, rather. Einar, thanks so much for joining me here. How do you read these developments as they unfold? I mean, Doklam still continues. Then you have this incursion in Ladakh and an incident first of its kind. You have, armies, some of them armed with iron rods, some throwing stones at each other.
Well, thank goodness it was only stones or alleged iron rods. I think the main point to take away from this is that an Indian officer reported, security officer, that it appears the group had lost its way. Now, if you think of the enormity of the border did, and that there was a confusion and an altercation occurred. Obviously, tensions on both sides, especially among troops, must be at a very, very high level. So at this point, I think it would be foolish to jump to any conclusion that this was some sort of deliberate act trying to provoke to provoke India. I think it should be more put down to the fact that both sides are trying to de-escalate this situation.
But do you believe when the Chinese side say they had no idea about what had happened at Pangong Tso? Do you believe that hours after the incident was reported?
Well, let's put it this way. There is a long tradition here that you do not want to report bad news. If, in fact, that army patrol was responsible for crossing over and creating an incident, this is not something that their commanders would want to necessarily report to Beijing, that during a heightened time that they had somehow made a mistake.
Okay.
In China, you make a mistake and you can be dismissed. It can end your career.
All right. I think you said it over there. Professor Swaran Singh, he's a professor at the School of International Studies at the Jawaharlal Nehru University. He's also joining me live from New Delhi. Professor Swaran Singh, do you see anything unusual in the way India has handled the events, starting from what happened 2 months ago in Doklam and now in this latest instance of incursion?
I think very clearly there is an effort on Indian side to recalibrate, reorganize the relationship on the border with China. And some of that insistence with restraint, but with firmness, is beginning to show some results. And in that sense, it's not good news that troops were clashing in the western sector as well. But if you see the response from Chinese side, it shows that they are willing to also show restraint. And I find it difficult to believe that Beijing was not aware This was India's Independence Day. Border is kept with firmness, and not only celebrations but also alertness is increased on Independence Day or occasions like that. And it was clearly understood that a skirmish of this nature would really flare up and will be between New Delhi and Beijing. Some clarifications will be sought. So I don't think that the Beijing was unaware of what happened on the ground. But apparently the response of insisting on China's effort to maintain peace and stability is a good response in that sense. I think India's firmness is being understood in Beijing is what we can see from this incident.
Okay, you say that message is being sent across and perhaps being received as well. In fact, let me try and go across to our guest in Hong Kong, Mr. Andrew Leong. I'm being told he'll be joining us in just a few moments. But Einar, coming back to you, internally, how is China seeing all of this?
Well, I think China, the upper echelon, that these things are handled in a way that is conducive to peaceful and ongoing relationship. I think especially as we approach the BRICS summit, the Belt and Road initiatives, and these types of events, China is very, very concerned about having things go very smoothly. You can recall when Modi visited China, there was enormous efforts made to make sure that not only security, but that every attention to detail and that every effort was made to make sure that such a visit was productive and very comfortable for Modi. So I think this is part of the Chinese way of addressing things. They're very, very concerned about detail.
Okay.
As possible.
All right, Einar. In fact, Andrew K.P. Leong, international and independent strategist, he's also joining us live from Hong Kong. Mr. Leong, thanks so much for joining me here. Let me start by asking you, what's the overview that you get? You know, you had Doklam, now you have these incursions in Ladakh, and you have senior army officer, brigadier level officers having a chat about it. I mean, what's happening on Doklam front then? No talks, nobody moving from their respective stands?
Well, I think the Doklam affair has been going on for a couple of months already. And in China itself, there is increasing kind of rise of nationalism, saying that, hey, you know, we can't allow this happening in our border. You know, China had always had this problem of incursions into China claimed territories and so on and so forth. But on the other hand, at this point in time, these are minor crashes by any comparison. I mean, these skirmishes have happened in the past many times along this very long border between China and India. And the long-standing disputes hasn't been resolved. But this is not a priority for China. But on the other hand, China cannot afford to be seen to be weak if, for example, India increases the extent of the incursion and is also rattling up the rhetoric, as it were. So at the moment, if both sides maintain a degree of calm and through diplomatic discussions, things could be smoothed out, and both sides can find a way to get out of this rather, if you like, meaningless conundrum. Because at the end of the day, I think China would back down in building a road, effectively, because China's building a road in its own territory, even though it seemed to be threatening India's security, but that doesn't give India the right into China's claimed territory. So anyway, but I think that at the moment, all these additional incursions, and they are relatively minor by comparison.
Okay.
Keep them
in fact, many angles to this story in Doklam as days progress. I'd request you all to please stay with me while we explore another angle to this. Is the Pangong Tso incident linked to the recent developments in India's ties with America? Well, sources did not discount it, although they said that China has been increasingly wary of the growing engagement between New Delhi and Washington. And Tuesday's announcement by the White House in that sense must have added to Chinese suspicions about the direction of India-US convergence. The White House, referring to a conversation between US President Donald Trump and the Indian Prime Minister, said, and I quote, "The leaders resolved to enhance peace and stability across the Indo-Pacific region by establishing a new 2x2 ministerial dialogue that will elevate their strategic consultations. Now, reading between the lines, it appears defense and security is now at the top of India-US's agenda. Analysts say it marks a shift from past US policy, which gave priority to consultations between the two foreign and commerce ministers. The new structure makes it similar to the 2+2 dialogue format between the Indian and Japanese foreign and defense secretaries. China's comment was studiedly neutral. They said, and I quote, "We hope India and US can develop relations which are conducive to regional peace and development." Just one question to each of my guests on this particular issue. I start with you, Professor Swaran Singh. How do you see this? It's evident that China is increasingly wary of how the US and India are taking their strategic ties forward at this point.
I think not only China, it has surprised several India watchers that completely unpredictable President Donald Trump has not really completely changed the relationship with India. In that sense, even if occasional, but such sentiments expressed by United States and by its friends and allies like Japan is a reflection of India very, very precariously, but even then able to manage that close relationship with United States and friends and allies, which of course is a sense of, is creating concern in Beijing. But when that is related to the border skirmishes would be a little stretching it. I believe that is something we need to notice. The nature and frequency of incursions on the border has changed. The middle sector has seen even air incursions and now incursions on the western sector. You remember 1962, the same lake was also area where India had really got into difficulty there.
Right.
So we need to really collaborate across the border as to what is happening. Doklam seems stable as of now. And I think nothing much to worry in that sense. It may take longer time, but it's not really flaring up anymore.
Right. Mr. Einar Thanjan, how do you look at this latest sort of, elevation in strategic partnership between Washington and New Delhi? How do you suppose China would be looking at this?
Well, quite frankly, for China, the difficulty here is they see this and the time Doklam incident as somehow connected to the Modi-Trump meeting. So this has been something that's been on their mind. I don't think that Beijing is saying that India and the U.S. can't have a strategic relationship. I don't think it's an internal trade.
Einar, we can barely hear you. We'll try and fix that audio connection with you. Let me take that to Mr. Leong at this point. Mr. Leong, would you like to take on from where Einar left it off? What is happening in China vis-a-vis looking at how India and US are taking their ties forward?
Well, I think China knows very well, even from the old days, America's on to a strategy of containing China, and this containment takes place not only to pivot to Asia, which is of course is more rhetoric than action up to now, but also aligning with countries friendly to China, or balancing against China. For example, in the Asia Pacific, that includes Vietnam, it includes originally the Philippines until now, of course, it includes Australia and particularly Japan. But in the Indian Ocean, China is fully aware that China's, for example, the Belt and Road extension of its influence through trade and also relationships. It seemed to be a threat to India, and of course, seeing that India is likely to be America in this strategy. But let's face it, I don't think that India would give up its non-allied policy that easily. It's one thing to be allied to the United States, it's another to be seen to
Absolutely.
be
you know, our next report talks about that a bit more. A lot really is at stake. Do stay with me. I'll come back to you, Einar Thanjan, in just a bit. Now, is the Doklam standoff affecting the broader India-China relationship? That's also a significant question. Well, India's IT ministry has given smartphone companies an August 28th deadline this year. They must detail how they ensure security and protect user data. If their replies are not satisfactory, penalties will be levied. Majority of these companies are from China. The top 3 selling smartphones in India are Chinese, namely Xiaomi, Vivo and Oppo. Suspicions about malware in Chinese communication and telecom equipment is growing. Last year, India banned some Chinese smartphones that lacked security features. In 2014, the Air Force warned its personnel from using some Xiaomi-branded mobile devices. And in that very year, Chinese firm Huawei was named in a hacking incident involving Bharat Sanchar Nigam, or the telephone operator of the government in the country. Einar, if I can come to you. Now, we understand there are broader ramifications to what's happening between India and China. I'm being told Einar is, his line has been disconnected. But Professor Swaran Singh, what are the larger ramifications here?
Two large countries growing the way they are, India and China will always have suspicions about each other. But I don't think the Indian side is, sort of putting that front forward. Our foreign minister has really emphasized that India is looking at building a developmental partnership with China. So these issues of irritations are, of course, there, but they are not going to completely derail the relationship, not from Indian side. And I don't think Chinese would either think of that. So I see it's a very large relationship with multiple colors in it. Sometimes, confrontation is much more visible than cooperation or coordination. But these are incidents which need to be really taken care of on the ground, but they are not going to derail the overall relationship between two countries.
Okay.
But we are not going to be fully comfortable ever with each other. We will always have issues of concerns about each other.
All right. Andrew Leong, sir, what do you have to say? I mean, do you share Professor Swaran Singh's sentiment on this, that tensions will always remain, but we can't do without each other as well because a lot is at stake?
I absolutely agree. But the reason why the two sides cannot afford to be at war, because there are a lot of common interests, and the reason why two sides would always be at odds with one another because of existing territorial disputes. For example, there's a very large state, the Arunachal Pradesh, which China claims as southern Tibet, and of course there's now Indian territory. And all these very large territorial disputes are likely to inform the side of China-Indian relationship. But as I said, there are lots of other things where the both sides can cooperate.
All right, that's all the time we have for leaving it at that. But thanks so much, Andrew K.P. Leong, Professor Swaran Singh, and Einar, of course.